Alright, welcome to our quick review of the Griffin-Ford model for Latin American cities. The slides were designed to accompany the book People, Places, and Culture. I am, of course, Ms. Gall, your host for the lecture. So, when we talk about South American cities in the Griffin-Ford model, a few things we need to bear in mind. One is that these cities blend traditional elements of South American culture, which is to say they show the influence of indigenous cultures, they show the influence of Spanish colonialism, right? And then also, they combine these traditional elements with globalization. And what globalization is doing is reshaping the urban scene, combining radial sectors and concentric zones. So if you've seen some of the other mini lectures talking about some of the other city models, some of the North American city models, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about when I say concentric zones and radial sectors, right? It's a combination of the concentric zone model and the sector model. As with pretty much any city model, what we see is there's a thriving CBD, that central business district, that downtown area, that really kind of anchors the model. Okay? It's kind of the heart of the model, or the center of the model, right? Along with that, in South America, as in any industrializing country, whether they're newly industrializing, whether they're a less developed country that's working on trying to industrialize, right? There's shanty towns and shelters that spring up all around cities that are made of, they're unplanned groups, they're crude dwellings, really, made of whatever the people who were making the houses can find, right? So scrap wood, iron, cardboard that spring up around these cities. I'll go ahead and change the slide here so we take a look at a picture of the model. Right, you can already notice where it combines some of those elements of the concentric zone model and of the sector model. Right, so again, in the middle, we've got that central business district combined with a marketplace, and then around it, what we've got are these other areas, right? So you've got kind of a main spine. The top part of that's kind of the industrial part, and then there's a commercial district, right? Kind of oftentimes a commercial street or a couple of streets that run down from the CBD to, they call it a mall. I'm going to guess that's mall, perhaps in the more traditional European sense of just an open air space, right, where markets and things like that are open and conducted. Right next to that business district, that's where the elites live. That's where the wealthy people live. Okay? And spreading out from there, then you see some of that gentrification that we talked about in one of the previous lectures, where what's happening is wealthy-ish people are moving into poorer areas, and they're rehabilitating the houses, and they're raising the property values and making the neighborhoods nicer and things like that. Right? And then you've got around them, they call it a zone of maturity, but really it's kind of a continuation of some of what we see there, where it's people trying to move into kind of the wealthier areas nearer to the center piece, right? Nearer to the wealthy people, nearer to the central business district. We've also got kind of our middle class. And remember, in newly industrializing and less developed countries, the middle class is significantly smaller than it is in industrialized countries. So we've got much smaller segments dedicated to our middle class. And then we've also got kind of around the edges, right? They call them different things, but the reality is these are the squatter settlements. Right? And then that zone of in situ accretion, that middle purple ring, that's our poorer folks combined with, if I remember correctly, some of the businesses and things like that, right? It's those outer rings when you hear about crime in Latin American cities, or if you, with Brazil hosting the upcoming Olympics, for instance, you hear about them clearing out the favelas. It's those outer rings, those orange areas, that's where they're talking about. They're trying to clear out of drugs and gangs and violence and things like that. So, I do have to apologize a little bit because I'm afraid Latin American cities not necessarily my strong suit, but you get the basic idea. You can kind of see where much like with European settlements, where the market is kind of the heart of downtown in that central business district, and the wealthy live near there, right? And then the poor live on the edges. That's very different than when we're talking about, for instance, in North America. So you can see that colonial influence. And then when you actually dig into the cities, that's where you can start to see the influence of globalization, where you can see the influence of indigenous cultures and things like that in terms of the specific layout of streets, what types of shops and markets are available, right? So if we were to talk about globalization, that CBD, maybe down towards the mall and the market, that's where we're going to find those big global companies that are catering to the rich, the wealthy, and the newly emerging middle class, right? And trying to cater slowly but surely to those poorer folks as they accumulate wealth. So if you have any questions or anything like that, I'd be delighted to answer them. Please just bring them into me during class, and I will see you the next time we meet.